I was sitting at my usual cafe when my cousin suddenly sat down in the chair next to me and said, "Your husband is dating my wife." I laughed instinctively and said, "It's not April Fool's Day. That joke's not funny." But William smiled and whispered, "Come with me. I'll show you the truth." In just a single moment, my heart, which had been fine, started to tremble as if something was about to collapse. My name is Evelyn, 34 years old, and that afternoon, after leaving a long shift at the maternity department of San Jose Hospital, I felt as if my legs were carrying the entire burden of the past week. Normally, on our wedding anniversary, I would eagerly leave the hospital as early as possible, drive home to shower, change into the dress Jackson loved most, and head to the restaurant where we used to sit by the window overlooking the busy street, reminiscing about our 7 years together. But this year was unlike any other. I had nowhere to rush to, no plans to look forward to. No one was waiting for me. That morning, just as I was hurriedly sipping coffee before heading into the delivery room, my phone buzzed. It was Jackson, my husband. I thought he would say something to mark the occasion, something that would make me smile all day, but no. The message was just one line. "I have to drive to San Diego, meeting a VIP client, urgent stock investment matter. No, sorry, no, I'll make it up to you." Not even a familiar emoji. Just a cold announcement, like something sent to a colleague, not a wife. I stared at the message for a long while, the disappointment spreading through my chest, but then I calmed myself the way I always did. It's his job. I understand. I was always the one who understood. I always tried to understand. When my shift ended, I didn't want to go home right away. That house was too quiet, too empty every time Jackson was away. So I turned into a favorite cafe in downtown San Jose. It was crowded. The sound of the espresso machine blending with people's chatter, sunset light reflecting through the glass windows, made everything feel a little warmer. I chose a table by the window, ordered a hot cappuccino and a chocolate croissant, the pastry I always treated myself to on special days. Our anniversary, even when no one remembered, was still special. To me alone. I placed my hand on the lightly crisp crust of the pastry. The scent of chocolate mingling with butter brought some comfort. I closed my eyes for a few seconds, trying to will myself not to think too much. But just as I was about to take the first bite, the cafe door opened and a man walked in, dragging a heavy black suitcase behind him. It was William, my maternal cousin, someone I didn't see often, but every time we met, I always felt reassured by his calmness. I recognized the suitcase immediately because William never brought one when he was just moving around the city. He looked around, spotted me, and walked straight to my table as if he already knew I was there. He placed the suitcase on the floor, sat down across from me without waiting for an invitation. I was a little surprised, but before I could ask anything, he spoke, his voice low and serious enough to send a chill down my spine. "Your husband is having an affair with my wife." I laughed for half a second. A reflexive laugh, because I couldn't imagine William saying something like that with such a dead serious face. I shook my head and replied, "That's not funny, William. Today is our 7th anniversary. Jackson is on his way to meet a client in San Diego." I said that like someone clinging to the last thread of logic in her life, as if by believing in the business trip story, everything would remain safe, my marriage would still be intact, and I wouldn't have to face something far more terrifying. But William didn't laugh. He didn't raise an eyebrow, didn't blink. He just looked at me with an expression I had never seen on him before, an expression that mixed pity, anger, helplessness, and perhaps guilt. He reached across the table, gently took my hand, as if he were about to deliver bad news to a patient's family. "Come with me." His voice was quiet, but firm. "I'll show you the truth." My heart sank, not from pain, but from intuition. A very clear sense that this ordinary afternoon was about to open a door to something I could never turn back from. The croissant remained untouched on the plate, the cappuccino still steaming in front of me. but everything suddenly blurred, as if someone had pulled a tension wire in the air and thrown my life off its axis. I took a deep breath, and I stood up, because when a man like William, someone who has never exaggerated anything, looks you in the eye and says, "The truth is waiting ahead," you know it's time to face it. I followed him out of the cafe, my palms cold, feeling like I had just stepped through a door I wasn't prepared for. The parking lot was still crowded that afternoon, the late sun shining down on the cars pulling out, but all I remembered was the wind hitting my face as William opened the car door for me. I climbed into the passenger seat, closed the door, and in that moment, the silence was so thick I could hear my own heartbeat skipping. My state was strange, half believing, half afraid. Believing, because I knew William never made things up. Afraid, because a part of me still wanted to believe in Jackson, believe in our marriage. William got in, closed the door, and we were both silent for a few seconds. He stared straight ahead, as if trying to arrange his words so he wouldn't hurt me more. Then, finally, he spoke, voice low, with a hint of strain. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I should have told you earlier." I turned to look at him. His face seemed years older since I last saw him, the dark circles under his eyes deeper, like he'd been through a psychological war for months. I forced a smile, though the corners of my mouth trembled slightly. "Why? Are you apologizing?" He sighed, a heavy breath that sent a chill down my spine. "Because I know you've always tried to protect your marriage. You always believe in others. I was afraid that if I told you, I'd be the one to destroy what you've been trying to hold on to." Each word hit me straight in the chest. I thought of the times I tried to fill the growing void between Jackson and me, the nights I waited for him, the conversations I always had to start, the business trips that became more and more frequent. Turns out I was the only one holding on. The car pulled out of the lot. William turned onto the highway. The evening wind slipped through the window cracks, tousling my hair, but my body felt like it was burning, trapped in a room with thick air. I looked down, and what startled me was the large black suitcase, carefully zipped, sitting right at my feet. It was so big that I wondered how I hadn't noticed it the moment he entered the cafe. I leaned down, placed my hand on the fabric surface, the cold of the metal seeping through the cloth. I asked softly, "Why? Did you bring this? Are you really going on a business trip?" William didn't look at me, but I clearly heard him swallow before replying, "No, this isn't a business suitcase." I looked up. His eyes flicked through the rearview mirror, and in them, I saw something like a pain that had been suppressed for far too long. "Inside here," he said slowly, "is all the evidence. Photos, videos, documents, recordings, files, everything you need to see." I held my breath. Whether from pain or fear, I wasn't sure, but my hands were shaking so much I had to grip the edge of the seat to stay calm. He continued, voice firm now, as if he'd rehearsed this line for a long time. "I didn't want you to see these things alone. I know it'll hurt, but you deserve to know the truth, before things get worse." That sentence unlocked a terrifying truth in my mind. William had prepared for this moment. He knew I would be hurt. He knew I would break. And he knew. We didn't have much time left to pretend my marriage was still okay. I clenched my fists, tried to steady my voice. "Where are you taking me?" William looked straight at the long road opening ahead, the streetlights reflecting off the windshield like endless streaks of light. "To where they're meeting tonight," he said, "and you need to see it with your own eyes." My chest tightened. I knew this was the beginning of something I could never turn back from. William maintained a steady speed on the highway, but his hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. I glanced at him from the corner of my eye, feeling certain that the story he was about to tell wasn't just a random discovery. It was a moment that had changed his entire life, and now it was pulling me into the storm that neither of us had realized we were already in the center of. "Evelyn, he began, his voice hoarse, as if he was digging up a memory he didn't want to revisit. Everything started around 6 weeks ago. I gave a slight nod, not daring to interrupt. It was a Tuesday. I went to a client's house in Willow Glen for an interior design consultation. The appointment ended early, so I drove through the back streets. The area with that little boutique motel, you know it? I did. An old-style motel tucked between low-rise buildings, the kind of place people stopped at for a few hours and left as if they were never there. William continued. As I slowed down to turn onto the main road, I saw a woman walking out of the motel. She was wearing a beige sweater, dark jeans, and carrying a small Fendi bag that Tiffany really likes. From that angle, I knew right away it was her. I tilted my head slightly, my heart skipping a beat. Walking beside her, he said slowly, was a man with a very familiar build. I swallowed hard. My palms were growing cold. William didn't turn to look at me, but I could feel the tension tightening around the car like a noose. I tried to get a better look, he went on, but right then, the CEO called. An emergency call about a big contract that needed my approval. I couldn't ignore it. If I had, the whole project would have collapsed, and dozens of people would have to start from scratch. I closed my eyes for a second, picturing William sitting in his car, taking the call while trying to keep an eye on the two figures walking out of the motel. And I pictured that familiar-looking man walking close beside Tiffany, but I still didn't dare put the word Jackson into my thoughts. By the time I hung up and tried to circle back, William said, his voice lowering, they were gone. I only caught a glimpse of their backs turning onto a side street. The car kept moving forward, but the world inside me felt like it had slowed to a crawl. When I got home, William said, I asked Tiffany why she didn't answer my calls that afternoon. I'd tried a few times to set up dinner. She said she'd just gone to the fashion store late to check inventory for the manager. A simple statement, a smooth excuse, but in this context, it was dark and terrifying. From that moment, William tightened his grip slightly on the wheel. I felt something was off, but I still wanted to believe. I thought, maybe I saw wrong. Maybe I was tired, overthinking. I understood that feeling more than anyone, because in this moment, I was doing the exact same thing, clinging to the fragile hope that the man walking next to Tiffany that day wasn't Jackson, but the deepest part of my heart, the part untouched by reason, had already started to tremble. That should have, I whispered, my voice no longer steady, that should have been the moment to truly start doubting. William nodded, and in his eyes, I saw the pain he had buried for 6 long weeks. Yes, he said, but you and I, Evelyn, we're the same. We always want to believe the people we love, even when the truth is staring us right in the face. A sentence that made my chest tighten. For him, and for myself. William stayed silent after that last sentence, letting the heaviness fill the car, neither of us wanting to name what it was. I stared out the window. The road ahead stretched like an endless line, but inside me, a storm was starting to rise. I didn't know what I hoped for more, the truth, or the chance that this was all just a misunderstanding. William adjusted the rearview mirror and continued, his voice dropping, as if he were reliving the moment that shattered his marriage. The very next day, I hired a private investigator. I turned to him, my eyes widening. I wasn't surprised he'd hired someone. I was stunned thinking about how many weeks he'd carried this awful suspicion alone, with no one to talk to. I didn't want to do it, William added, but Tiffany's smile that night, it didn't look like someone who'd just gotten back from checking inventory. I saw something else. Something very different. I gave a faint nod. I understood that feeling, the kind of intuition women often have, and that men are sometimes afraid to admit. The investigator worked quickly, William said. He tracked silently, took photos, recorded audio, cross-checked schedules. A week later, he called me to his office. I felt my stomach tighten. His office was in Fremont, William said. A small room, full of files, and the smell of stale coffee. When I walked in, he didn't say a word. Just slid a brown folder across the desk to me. I swallowed hard. I could almost see it all, as if I were there. William sitting in a wooden chair, yellow light casting down on his face, his hand trembling slightly as he opened the file. The first page, he said, was a photo of Tiffany walking into Jackson's house. My entire back went cold. Then photos of them together, entering that same boutique motel I saw the first time. He paused for a few seconds, took a deep breath. Then came photos of them at another motel. Then, at my house. Then, at your house. I felt like I couldn't breathe. And then I got to the last page, William said slowly. A clear shot of the man who had been walking with her 6 weeks ago. I already knew what he was about to say, but hearing it from his mouth still felt like being cut to the bone. It was Jackson, William said. Your husband. I turned my face away, digging my fingers into my coat pocket, my nails pressing painfully into my palm. William continued, his voice tightening. They've been having an affair for 8 months. 8 months. 8 months. More than 240 days, nearly 1/5 of a year, while I had still believed I was trying to preserve a marriage that, in truth, had already been destroyed by someone else. They only met, William went on, when you or I were away on extended business trips. Very discreet, very calculated. I closed my eyes, every sentence cutting deeper into my chest. They met mostly in 2 places, Tiffany's house and Jackson's. And a few times, William added, at the boutique motel I saw them at. Every time he said the word house, my heart constricted a little more. My house, the one I had built corner by corner, chosen every kitchen item, hung every painting. His house, where I had dinner with them on weekends. All of it had been used as a breeding ground for betrayal. The worst part, William took a deep breath, was when the investigator sent me a bank statement. Jackson used your joint investment account to buy gifts for Tiffany. I opened my eyes. What joint account? I asked, my voice cracking. The joint investment fund you two had. You contributed much more than he did. The investigator listed the transactions. Chanel bags, silk garments, Louboutin shoes, dresses worth over $2,000. I suddenly felt nauseated. William spoke gently, like he feared every word might hurt me more. Evelyn, I even found a transaction for a Tiffany & Company. Necklace worth over $6,000. He bought it for Tiffany. That name, Tiffany, suddenly burned in my ears. I turned toward the window, trying to breathe steadily, but my voice still trembled. Keep going, William. Don't hold anything back. William nodded, his eyes fixed straight ahead, as if trying to keep himself from falling apart while recounting it. And that was only the tip of the iceberg. William's last sentence echoed in my head as the car turned onto a quieter road. I sat still, clutching the seatbelt tightly, trying to stop myself from breaking down right there. But I knew what he was about to say next would be even heavier. William glanced at me once in the rearview mirror, making sure I was still steady enough to listen. Then he went on. 5 days ago, I decided I had to catch them in the act. I had to see it with my own eyes, so they couldn't deny it. I turned toward him, my brow furrowing slightly. I knew how cautious and disciplined William was. If he'd made a plan, it wasn't impulsive. I kept thinking, William said, how could I get Tiffany to reach out to Jackson without suspecting a thing? And then I had the idea to create a fake business trip. I felt my heart change rhythm. 5 days ago, he continued, I told Tiffany the company was sending me to Miami to finalize a major interior and landscaping contract for a luxury seaside resort chain. He paused, as if letting me imagine the scene. Tiffany sitting in their luxurious living room, William holding a stack of documents that looked like a real project. I prepared a complete mock contract, he said. Company logo, forged partner signatures, renderings, estimates. Everything looked real. so real no one would question it. I nodded slightly. William had worked in design for over 20 years. Preparing a professional-looking file in a few hours was nothing for him. When I showed it to Tiffany, William continued, she lit up. She hugged me, congratulated me, but her smile didn't look like a proud wife's smile. He turned to me, and the sadness in his eyes pierced straight through me. It looked like someone seeing a golden opportunity to meet her lover without needing to hide. I could feel his pain, the same pain now spreading through my own chest. William emphasized every word. When I saw Tiffany's eyes in that moment, I knew. Her mind wasn't on Miami. It wasn't on the deal. It was on Jackson. I tried to keep my breathing steady, though my throat had begun to burn. She asked what time my flight was. William continued. Asked how long I'd be gone. Asked if my manager was going with me. She asked too many things, and none of them were about work. They were all to make sure I'd really be gone long enough for them to have time together. He let out a dry laugh, not a happy sound, only bitter. That day, he said, Tiffany even said, I'm so proud of you. If you close this deal, the company will probably promote you to regional director. I shivered. Her words were too smooth, too natural, as if she'd rehearsed them before, or had long awaited the moment William would be out of the house. She also smiled, in a strange way. William added, not a joyful smile, but a smile of relief. I swallowed, asking softly, and you knew she would call Jackson right after? William nodded. Exactly, and I was right. That night, she thought I was asleep, but she called Jackson. I'll tell you about that part later. But from that smile, I knew the bait had worked. I leaned back against the seat, feeling like I'd just swallowed an ice-cold stone. Everything in William's story was too logical, too clear. I couldn't retreat into the safe zone of hope anymore. I exhaled slowly, my eyes staring blankly ahead. From that moment on, William said, his voice dropping lower, I understood. I wasn't just being betrayed. I was being played for a fool. That sentence stabbed straight through my chest, because I was beginning to understand. I had been played too. From that moment on, I understood that I wasn't just being betrayed. I was being treated like a fool. William's words still lingered in the air inside the car as we turned onto the narrow road leading out to the suburbs. I bit my lip hard, not daring to ask, because I knew the part he was about to share was when the truth would be laid bare. William exhaled deeply, as if preparing himself to rewind a film he had already watched once, far too painfully. That night, he began, I told Tiffany I wasn't feeling well. More precisely, I let her believe I'd caught a cold, that I couldn't keep working. I nodded slightly. I could imagine William, always strong, composed, forcing himself to act weak just so Tiffany wouldn't suspect a thing. I took an early shower, changed, and went to bed. William continued. She asked if I needed medicine. I said no. Then I got into bed and started snoring. I turned to him, eyes wide. You faked it? William pressed his lips together, nodding. I snored loudly on purpose, so she would be sure I was sound asleep. People who cheat always need that, a safe window before they sneak out. My hands began to grow cold. A man having to fake sleep, just to catch his own wife. It hurt in a way that no words could ever describe. I heard her footsteps pacing in the living room, William said, like she was checking everything. Then about 10 minutes later, the bedroom door creaked open. I held my breath. Tiffany peeked in, stared at me for a long time. The kind of look, to make sure I wouldn't suddenly wake up. He shrugged. I kept snoring steadily. I could almost feel the suffocating air of that room, the dim nightlight, the eerie silence, and a woman standing there, looking at her husband like he was an obstacle in her way. Eventually, William continued, she closed the door, and I heard the soft shuffle of her slippers going down the stairs. I clenched my fists, palms burning with anger on his behalf. I waited until her steps faded, then disappeared. William said. I opened my eyes, reached under the pillow for my phone, turned on the voice recorder. I looked at him, stunned by how thoroughly he had prepared. She went into the garage, he continued. When the garage door opened, I could hear the faint buzz of her phone vibrating as she dialed someone. My heart felt suspended in midair. I crept halfway down the stairs, William said, just close enough to hear the echo from the garage, but not close enough to be caught. I nodded faintly, throat dry. Then she said the first sentence. William's voice tightened, but remained composed. Baby, are you still awake? The air inside the car vanished. I heard everything, William said, eyes fixed on the road, unblinking, and I recorded every word. I swallowed hard, feeling every nerve in my body stretched to its limit. She told Jackson, William continued, that in 5 days I'd be going to Miami, that she'd arranged everything, that on that day, they'd go to my house to figure out how to transfer the assets under your name into Jackson's. I couldn't breathe, but William wasn't finished. What stunned me the most, he said softly, was how she referred to you. I turned to him, waiting. She said, Your dumb little wife. It felt like someone punched me straight in the chest. I turned my face away, not wanting William to see my reddening eyes, but I couldn't keep the tremor out of my voice. You heard that whole call? Yeah, he replied slowly. And I recorded it. Every second. In that moment, I realized everything I had believed, everything I'd tried to hold on to, was collapsing piece by piece. Not from Jackson, not from Tiffany, but from the words spoken that night, in a cold garage, where 2 traitors believed they were safe. William stopped talking for a moment, as if trying to regain his breath. The streetlight slid across the windshield, casting a pale yellow glow on his face, and I noticed his eyes were slightly red, weary, and hollow. He exhaled sharply before continuing, voice lower than before. After hearing that, I had to get back to bed immediately, or I was going to explode. He said his whole body had been shaking so badly it was hard to walk up the stairs. He lay back down in the same position, pulled the blanket over himself, and kept pretending to be asleep while his mind went completely blank. When Tiffany returned to the bedroom and stood in the doorway watching him, William said he had to regulate his breathing so carefully it hurt his chest. She thought he was still asleep and left the room, completely unaware that her entire call had been recorded. The next morning, Tiffany acted as if nothing had happened. She smiled faintly, asked if he wanted ginger tea. But that calmness only confirmed what William now understood. This woman no longer saw him as her husband, just a shadow in her way. I thought that phone call was the worst part, William said, eyes still staring ahead as if driving through memory itself. But I was wrong. The worst was still coming. I turned to him, hands clasped tightly together, like I was trying to hold on to something. Anything. I started checking everything, William continued. Tiffany's behavior, her work schedule, the times she said she was working late, and while I was going through your schedule, I realized something I couldn't ignore. I sat motionless. Jackson, William said slowly, has been meeting someone Tiffany knows more often than I expected. I frowned. Who? William swallowed before answering. A neurologist, a close friend of Tiffany's from college. My entire body felt thrown back against the seat. A chill spread from my spine to my neck, and I squeezed my hands even tighter. I checked the calendar, William said, and saw Jackson met with that person 3 times in the past 2 months. But those appointments didn't match any of your medical visits or any reason related to your health. I shook my head slightly, in disbelief, almost nauseated. Jackson had never taken me to see a neurologist. He didn't even like when I talked about the pressure at work. So the fact that he was seeing a neurologist unrelated to me was terrifying. William continued, his voice heavy with the weight of what he was about to reveal. I dug deeper, and the private investigator found a series of emails. Not many, just a few, but enough to understand. They were building a script. I looked at him, bracing for the thing my heart didn't want to hear. "Evelyn," William said, his voice nearly breaking. "They want to forge a mental health record for you." My breath caught for several seconds. "Jackson and Tiffany are planning for that doctor to diagnose you as unstable. They'll create a sequence of situations to make you look out of control, then use that record to file for a competency evaluation." I heard the pounding of my own heart, each beat aching like someone was squeezing it. "If they succeed," William said, "Jackson could petition for full financial control, including your joint investment fund, worth millions." I blinked rapidly, trying not to let the tears spill. That fund was my future. The money I had worked for over so many years, saved, invested wisely, built step by step. And to Jackson, it was just something to steal. William went on, his voice hoarse but clear. "Do you know what their final plan was? Once you're declared unstable, Jackson would transfer the money into a shell company registered under Tiffany's friend in Florida. Once the money's moved, they'd disappear." I clutched my chest. It wasn't just cheating, not just betrayal, not just lies. It was a plan to seize everything, calculated, structured, with accomplices, with legal weapons disguised as medical diagnosis. In William's voice, as he said the final sentence, I heard both rage and helplessness. "They don't just want to betray you, Evelyn. They want to erase you from your own financial life." I leaned my head against the window, lips trembling, eyes looking out at the road, but seeing nothing. Only the blur of streetlights rushing past, dragging with them the feeling that my world was being slowly twisted out of shape. And for the first time since I got into the car, I felt truly afraid. Not afraid of betrayal, but afraid of what I was really facing. A fully organized conspiracy. I was still frozen after William's last words, feeling as if someone had just ripped away a heavy curtain, exposing all the dark corners I never thought I'd have to see in my own marriage. The car drove through a long stretch of road without any lights, the darkness swallowing every sound around us, making his story feel twice as heavy. William took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping slightly as though part of the weight had just been lifted. Then he continued. "Ever since I found out they were planning to fabricate a mental health record for you, I couldn't wait another day. I contacted the detective again, and the two of us gathered every piece of evidence over 4 continuous weeks." I turned to look at him. For the first time since getting into the car, I noticed his hands were slightly trembling. Not from the cold, but from everything he had carried alone all this time. William said each piece of evidence was backed up in 3 copies. One for the lawyer, one for the investigator, and one he kept. He said he couldn't rely on emotion alone to expose them. Everything had to be done properly, legally, because the person behind Jackson and Tiffany wasn't just anybody. A licensed neurologist in the state of California. Someone with the authority to sign off on any medical record. I needed the right moment, William said slowly. One piece of evidence they couldn't refute. Someone from inside their plan had to confess. I held my breath. "And it happened," he continued, staring into the dark road ahead as if replaying the moment from the night before. "Last night, that neurologist confessed." I felt my heart stop. "Confessed? To everything?" I asked, my voice barely more than a breath. William nodded. "He was summoned by the authorities. At first, he tried to deflect. But when they played a copy of the audio recording, Tiffany talking about bribing him, he crumbled instantly." I raised a hand to my mouth, not from shock anymore, but because for a moment, my skin felt frozen like standing in winter wind. "What did he say?" I asked softly. William glanced at me, his voice steady, but his eyes blazing with fury. "He said Tiffany made the first move, that she promised him a personal fee, and Jackson would fund a fake investment as a cover. The sole purpose was to make you appear unstable, so Jackson could seize control of your assets. I closed my eyes. My throat was so tight it was hard to speak. He also said, William gripped the steering wheel. That Tiffany told him, that girl trusts people too much. A few sessions will be enough. I sat up straight, my whole body numb. Tiffany hadn't just betrayed me, not just cheated, not just been greedy. She saw me as an easy target, as prey. William continued, his voice steady but taut like a string about to snap. The authorities documented everything, confiscated his computer and appointment records, and last night, he officially signed a confession. I turned to look at William, and in my eyes was a mess of pain, shock, gratitude, and fear. He had done all of this alone. He had stood up and faced a conspiracy that, had it been only me, might have crushed me completely. William continued, his voice more resolute than I'd ever heard it. Today, I decided to end it. No more delays. No more giving them a second more. You deserve the whole truth, and I can't let you be lied to another second. The last streetlight passed above the windshield, revealing a brighter road ahead, and I knew this wasn't just a drive to expose Jackson and Tiffany. This was a journey to take my life back. William didn't say another word for the rest of the drive. The headlights swept past each house, each row of trees, every familiar corner of San Jose that now felt eerily foreign. I felt like the world I knew was sliding off its rails, and my heart, both aching and numb, couldn't bear another layer of truth. But I knew the worst was still ahead. Around 7 p.m., William turned into the narrow road leading to his house. A strange silence wrapped around the whole space, but as we approached the gate, I heard the first sound that pierced it. Music. Not loud, but loud enough to reach the driveway. A slow pop track, the kind people play when they want to create a cozy atmosphere. I looked at William. He said nothing, just pressed the brakes and switched off the headlights. Darkness fell over the two of us like a curtain. William placed his hands on the wheel for a few seconds, as if trying to hold back a rising pain. Then he turned to me. Are you ready? I wasn't ready. No one can ever be ready to see their husband and the woman they once considered family inside their own cousin's house. But I nodded. William opened the car door silently and signaled for me to follow him. We stepped into the yard. The music grew clearer, echoing from a slightly opened living room window, casting out a warm golden light. The kind of light perfect for a private date, not for a betrayal. At the final step up to the door, William took a deep breath, gently turned the knob, and pushed it open. In a single moment, everything I had feared, suspected, and dreaded was completely exposed. Tiffany was sitting on Jackson's lap. Their bodies pressed tightly together, as if it was second nature. Her face leaned close to his ear, whispering something. Jackson's hand rested on her waist, naturally, possessively. The image hit me so hard, I had to grip the shoe cabinet to keep from falling. It wasn't just an affair, not just betrayal. It was intimacy so shameless it burned, right in William's own house, the man they were destroying. Tiffany noticed us first. In an instant, she shot up so fast the chair toppled over behind her, mouth gaping like she'd swallowed air. Her face turned pale, lips trembling, but unable to form words. Jackson was different. He didn't leap up, didn't scream, didn't panic. He froze, like a statue caught in a spotlight. Eyes wide, mouth slightly open, but unable to speak. In that instant, I saw in Jackson's eyes a disgusting mix of panic, fear, and shame. But more than anything, it was the look of someone who thought he'd never be caught, until the exact moment he was. No one spoke immediately. Only the music kept playing. Awkward, off-key, out of place with the wreckage unfolding in the room, as if even it knew it was witnessing something it shouldn't. I stood there, my whole body numb, heart crushed under the cruelty of what I was seeing. Tiffany clutched her shirt, stepped back, stammering, Evelyn, William, this isn't what it looks like. But even before she finished that line, I didn't believe her. Not what it looks like? It was exactly what we thought. And worse. So much worse that every excuse became a joke inside that music-filled house. Tiffany kept backing away, repeating the same tired line every cheater says to cling to the last shred of hope. No, it's not what you think. But her voice shook so badly, even she didn't believe her own words. She clutched her shirt tight, eyes wide, panicking like a trapped animal. William didn't answer, didn't shout, didn't get emotional. He just walked straight to the dining table, where Tiffany and Jackson had just been getting cozy, and slammed a thick folder of evidence down. The sound of it hitting the wood echoed so loudly, the entire room fell silent. Even the music seemed ridiculous in the background. The photos fanned out. Tiffany getting into Jackson's car. The two of them kissing in front of the boutique motel. Them entering my house. Them spending the night at Williams. Each page was a stab. Tiffany stood frozen. Jackson took a step back, hand gripping the table like he needed something to keep from collapsing. William pulled out his phone, opened the recording file. And in that wide, silent house, Tiffany's voice from the garage played loud and clear, enough to make her break into tears. "Baby, in 5 days, my old man's going on a trip. Come to my place. We'll discuss how to handle Evelyn's assets, your dumb little wife." The last sentence dropped into the room like a bomb. I looked at Tiffany, and in that moment, I saw her completely fall apart. Jackson froze, his eyes squinting like someone hearing a death sentence. He opened his mouth to say something, but William cut him off. "Let me tell you both," he said, voice calm to the point of terrifying. "I've sent all this evidence to both your HR departments." That line shattered any hope they had of escape. Tiffany could barely stand. Jackson exhaled deeply, shoulders sagging like a man shot through the spine. But William wasn't finished. He reached into his bag and pulled out a folded paper, slapping it down on the table in front of Tiffany. It hadn't even flattened yet, but the header was clear. Petition for dissolution of marriage, State of California. "Sign it," William said, voice completely steady. "You have 30 minutes to get out of my house." Tiffany trembled so badly she had to hold onto a chair. Her tears hit the table, but none of us cared to hear her anymore. William had endured enough, and so had I. I turned and walked toward the door. No need to look back, no need to hear another word from them. But Jackson ran after me, grabbing my arm, his voice panicked like a drowning man. "Evelyn, let me explain. I was tricked. Tiffany set me up. I pulled my arm free, so cold I didn't recognize myself. "Jackson." I looked him straight in the eyes. No trembling, no pain, just the raw, bare truth. "You can save your explanation for the police and the court." He froze, like someone whose spine had just snapped. I turned and kept walking. The door behind me closed, shutting me off from the lies, the betrayal, and the conspiracy they had built for 8 months. What lay ahead wasn't freedom, but for the first time, I was close enough to touch it. When William's front door shut behind us, the click sounded like a final period I didn't have to say aloud. That night, I didn't return to my home. Not to the place where Jackson used to kiss me during rushed mornings, used to hold me after exhausting shifts, used to whisper words that now chilled me when I remembered them. I checked into a small hotel in downtown San Jose, where the soft yellow hallway lights and the familiar scent of hotel soap helped me stay calm. At least a little. I turned off my phone, unwilling to see his name pop up, unwilling to hear anyone tell me to stay calm or to give him a chance to explain. I needed silence. I needed to separate myself from everything. I needed to reassemble the pieces of memory that had just been torn apart. The next morning, as I opened a tiramisu from the hotel cafe, I realized my hands were still trembling. But for the first time in months, I didn't have to pretend to be okay. I didn't have to smile at anyone. I didn't have to force myself to fit into a marriage that had been hollow for far too long. I stayed at that hotel for 3 days. I didn't answer calls, didn't reply to emails, spoke to no one but William. On the 3rd day, Just as I finished my first sip of coffee, my phone buzzed. A message from William. He was summoned this morning. I stared at the message for a few seconds. I didn't reply. But inside me, something shifted. Like a legal door had just swung open. 2 hours later, William called, and his voice was so calm, I knew things had reached a point of no return. Jackson can't deny it anymore. They have everything. The call, the financial transactions, the emails with the neurologist, the appointment logs, hotel surveillance. I sat down on the edge of the bed, hands on my knees, eyes fixed on the gray carpet beneath me. And, William continued, he confessed. I closed my eyes. No joy, no satisfaction, no vengeance, just relief. The kind of relief when a heavy door finally closes behind you. What did he confess to? I asked, my voice thin as thread. William answered immediately, firmly. Financial fraud and conspiracy to commit medical deception. I nodded slightly, even though no one was watching me. I knew those charges weren't small, especially in a context involving falsified health records, fabricated diagnoses, and a target with medical authority like me. In the U.S., this wasn't something that could be settled with a few mediation sessions. What surprised me was, I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't shake. I just exhaled slowly, placed the phone on the table, and looked out the window. The afternoon sun cast soft light on the buildings across the street. People still walked by, as if the world hadn't shifted because a marriage just collapsed. But for me, the moment Jackson confessed wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning of a life I never thought I'd have to step into. A life where I was no longer the wife being used, no longer the woman seen as foolish, no longer the target of a conspiracy, but a woman standing, for the first time, to reclaim everything that was hers. 4 months after Jackson's interrogation, my life entered a phase I never imagined when I got married. The phase of standing in court, facing my former husband, the man who once held my hand beneath a church dome, now sitting in pale orange prison attire, handcuffs just removed, his eyes devoid of confidence or pride. The divorce trial moved faster than expected, as Jackson had already confessed to the authorities. The prosecutor simply presented what was already clear in the files: medical fraud conspiracy, financial deception, deliberate collusion with a licensed physician to forge false records for the purpose of asset theft. I remember clearly the moment the judge read the final decision. Her voice was deep, firm, and without hesitation. Divorce granted. Asset division, 85-15 in favor of the plaintiff, Mrs. Evelyn. I stood there, inhaled deeply. No joy, no sadness, just the feeling of being returned to myself. The portion I received wasn't just a number. It was the result of over 10 years in the medical field, sleepless shifts, self-earned scholarships, meticulously calculated investments, and sacrifices Jackson never understood. The judge continued, the defendant must reimburse $127,000 spent on the affair, including dining, hotels, luxury gifts, and transportation during the commission of these crimes. I looked down at the detailed report the lawyer slid toward me. $127,000. Every dollar he had secretly taken from our joint fund now had to be returned. And that was only the civil part. The criminal sentence was far heavier. Jackson lowered his head, hands clasped in front of him, as the judge declared, Defendant Jackson Carter, 5 years imprisonment for financial fraud and conspiracy to commit medical deception. No cries, no protests, just the heavy silence of a man who knew he had destroyed his own life. Then came the neurologist, the man who thought a few medical signatures could outsmart the law. His lawyer tried to argue, my client was misled by Tiffany, but the judge wasn't moved. Permanent revocation of medical license. 4 years imprisonment for falsifying psychiatric records and participating in a conspiracy to defraud. I watched him get handcuffed and led out of the courtroom, not with satisfaction, but a deep pity for a career thrown away for dirty incentives. Finally, Tiffany. She looked up at the judge with mascara-streaked eyes, hair disheveled, completely unlike the polished image she had crafted. The judge read the sentence, not skipping a beat. Defendant Tiffany Lawson, 4 years imprisonment for complicity in medical fraud and aiding financial deception. Tiffany sobbed uncontrollably, but what I saw wasn't regret. It was disappointment that her plan had failed too soon. As each one was led out through the steel door, the clang of the lock sounded like the final punctuation of fate, and for the first time in months, I no longer had to run from fear, because justice had stood with me. I walked out of the courtroom with a signed divorce, a clear asset ruling, and a freedom I had paid for with every piece of my heart. But that wasn't the end. It was only the first chapter of a new life, one where I would no longer be anyone's target. 1 year after that trial, my life barely resembled the version of me that once existed. Not Evelyn the betrayed, not Evelyn trying to fix a broken marriage, but the Evelyn of now, a woman standing on her own, no longer trembling at the thought of the past. The turning point came during a private meeting at the hospital. The department director pulled out a folder and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Absolute trust. Evelyn, starting today, you'll be the head of obstetrics. I stood silently for a moment, not out of surprise, but because it felt like all those sleepless nights, every hard case, every evening I left the hospital still wearing scrubs that smelled of antiseptic, had finally landed where they belonged. I signed the appointment with a hand that no longer shook like it did the day I left my old marriage. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living my own life, not as a backdrop for someone else's lies, not a target for someone's theft. A few months later, I moved into a beachside house in California, where every morning I opened the windows to sea breeze, the salt in the air making it feel like my lungs were brand new. No more late-night arguments, no more fear of midnight silence, no more waiting for a text about a meeting that ran long. In that house, I learned how to live again, planting flowers on the porch with my own hands, buying a new jade green tea set, decorating the living room exactly to my taste, and leaving the window open at night to listen to waves instead of my own sighs. I began therapy with Samantha, a woman in her 60s, silver hair at the temples, eyes deep but never judgmental. I didn't go to therapy to forget. I went to understand. To understand why I ignored my instincts so many times. To understand why I clung to someone who had long since left me. To understand why I once believed I had to endure pain just to keep a family. And to understand that I deserved more. In that warm, quiet room, I spoke words I had never dared say during 7 years of marriage. And with every session, I untied a knot inside me, the kind Jackson and Tiffany once believed would bind me forever. Today, in my small kitchen facing the sea, I open a paper bag from my favorite French bakery. Inside is a chocolate croissant, the pastry I always saved for special days, but now no longer symbolizes waiting or anniversaries. I place it on a plate, pour myself a cup of hot Earl Grey, and sit at the wooden table I bought last week. No second cup. No one across from me. Just me, and the piece I had to crawl through pain to find. I take the first bite, and as the chocolate melts on my tongue, I realize something my heart had been trying to tell me for years. My intuition had been right all along. Those nights when something felt off, but I convinced myself otherwise. Those moments when I felt distant, but blamed myself for being too sensitive. All the small signs I had tried to ignore. They were warnings I didn't listen to, but I no longer blame myself. Because the truth is, betrayal didn't destroy me. The truth saved me. The truth pulled me out of a hollow marriage. The truth dragged me away from a scheme that could have taken everything. The truth brought me here, to this coastline, where I live by the beat of my own heart, not the heart of someone who only knew how to hurt it. I look out the window, where the sunset brushes the ocean's surface, a streak of orange stretched across a new horizon. And I know, deep in my soul, I will never again trade my clarity for a perfect marriage. Never again. My story ends here, not with a perfect ending, but with awakening. If something in this story touched something within you, you can like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Not to support me, but so you don't miss the stories that help us reflect on ourselves and maybe rediscover something we've lost for a long time.